Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem, Shem Irgin Shirter. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Harazev Smith on Amirah La'akum, Halachos Melacha Yom Tov. Non-Jew doing Melacha on Yom Tov. I'd like to big yeshikach to Elam Shem for sponsoring today's shir with the Nishmas Alta Sarah Etel, Bas Alta Yechiel Mechel, La Shalom, the Yotzai was yesterday Chof El, and Nishmas Shir with Sarah Chaim. To have a great list sponsoring a shir called Irgin Shirter, 718-851-8651, email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Amirah La'akum is something that's very common Mid Shabbos b'Shabbatai, but I think Yom Tov, if you notice, there's 2 days, sometimes even 3 days Yom Tov. And the shaylos are much more common. I think befrat Sukkahs, when Sukkahs, don't forget, the sukkah is our dining room, but it turns to our bedroom, and if the lights are on at night you can't sleep, or the lights don't go on and you can't eat. So we have shaylos, and especially on Sukkahs, we have sometimes the bamboo mats, the schach falls off its place. Can a guy put back the schach? So we have a host of questions regarding Yom Tov. Of course, the shvuah shaylos when it's very hot. Can you have a guy put on the air conditioner? Can you have a guy close the oven? Close the stovetop? So basically, we have to clarify that hopefully we do know Hilchos Amirah La'akum on Shabbos, the Shabbos guy, when it's mutter, when it's not. What are the halachos about a Yom Tov guy? Is there an issur of Amirah La'akum on Yom Tov like it is on Shabbos? Or maybe we'll say Shabbos that Lamaisa is a skilach. Then Chazal asked Amirah La'akum. But who said Yom Tov, which at most is an asay, but it's not chiyuv skila? Who said there's an issur Amirah La'akum? So to that we're going to say Iba Yisei Mikra, Iba Yisei Misvar. First of all, Al Pi Svara, even if it's not skila, a lav is bad enough. And the emes, I think it's really a beferish Gemara. The Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf Tzadik has a shayla: is there an issur Amirah La'akum b'shari isurim? Gemara's mashal is tell a guy to muzzle the animal. Zok the Gemara, yes, we do say Amirah La'akum b'shari isurim, even though it's not skila like Shabbos. And that's where we paskin a Choshen Mishpat. There is an issur Amirah La'akum b'shari isurim. So in other words, Avad Shabbos is more chama, but Yom Tov or any asay or lav is chamer enough. But more so, and this is the Iba Yisema Svar, because it's the oldest question: what's wrong with having a guy do Melacha for you? Fakir guy sheshavas chayev misa. I remember, like yesterday, I was all in 10th grade, and I was the summer where the camp where I go to. There's a wonderful bacha, and I was share. He was a Baal Tshuva, came from Springfield, Massachusetts. And in the middle of summer, we found that he wasn't a Baal Tshuva. He was a guy. See, his name was Cohn. His father was a Yid, but his mother was a Geiris officially. But they were mavar without a shadow of doubt that the Geiris was worth 0. It wasn't even a Sofa Geiris. So he was a guy. So the first question that we had, I mean, not me, the people that knew what halacha had, is what does he do about Shabbos? So Rabbi Manetsky paskin that he has to mechalel Shabbos every single Shabbos until there'll be Magaya. So there's someone asked, but what did he do? He lit a candle. So l'chayra, that's a Melacha and Sheicha l'gufa, because he wasn't using the candle to have anah. So someone answered, a guy can zich verlassen after Rambam, the Melacha and Sheicha l'gufa is an issur d'oraisa. That was the story. But the point is, a guy sheshavas chayev misa. What's wrong with a guy do Melacha for Yid? So Rashi and Avodah Zarah Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph says, why is the Amirah La'akum asa? Misham mimtzai cheftzecha v'daber davar dibur asa. So Rashi is saying a davar nifla. I can't say on Shabbos that I'm going to paint my house on Sunday, even though I'm not doing Melacha. But you can't talk about Melacha on Shabbos. So Rashi is saying, you know why I can't tell a guy to put on the oven for me on Shabbos? Not the guy's problem, it's my problem. I'm telling it, put an oven on. That's talking about a Melacha. And that's the issur midivrei Kabbalah, the Rabbanan, based on a pasuk of a daber davar. So Amirah La'akum is not the guy's problem, it's the Yid's problem. He's violating the issur of a daber davar. And that is one of the main reasons. The only question is, if that's the case, if that's the only reason for the issur, let's say I don't tell the guy anything. Let's say I hint to him. Or let's say the guy on his own wants to do Melacha for me. So there's no dibur. Why is it asa? So Rashi in a different place in Shabbos Kuf Nun Gimel, Rashi says, you know why Amir L'Akim is asa? Hareu keshluchai sheyise'enu b'Shabbos. Rashi in Shabbos Kuf Avav says beferish that Lamaisa Amir L'Akim is asa because the guy is a shliach of the Yid. Zok the Rav Shulchan Aruch, I ein shliach l'Varveira, ein shliach l'Akim. But l'chumra we have to be choishish. Yes shliach l'Varveira and yes shlichus l'Akim. So the second reason is shlichus. Again, it's not the goy's problem. Okay, goy shavas chayiv misa, but the malach is attributable to the yid, and therefore, like the yid did it. Now, this is definitely the two main reasons, but there has to be more to it, because it's halacha psuka and no shaila about it. Mr. Burr says in Reish Ayin Vav Sif Kat Yud Aleph. Let's say the guy walks into your house, and you didn't ask him. He says, I see your lights are off, I'm a very experienced Shabbos guy, don't tell me anything, I will put it on my own. So up to Mr. Burr, you have to tell him to leave. If he doesn't listen, chase him out. Because Amira L'Akum is lav dafka Amira. It's a guy doing Melacha for a Yid, even without an Amira. So now, the question is, if the only reasons are Shlichus and or Dibur, it doesn't apply when there's no Shlichus. So here we have a third reason, and that's the Rambam's reason in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Vav Halach Aleph. Zok the Rambam, why is Amir L'Akum asa? K'dei shleitei Shabbos kala beinayim v'yavei l'asayis ba'atzmo. Now this is the most logical reason. Just think for a moment what Shabbos would look like if Goyim could do our malachas. The guy could cook when it's not Bishul Akum, put the lights on, you could have your favorite recording of Daf Yomi Shir, you could put it on and close it off, you could do everything. So there are two problems. First of all, there won't be a trace of Shabbos. Where's the Menucha Shabbos? And also, once you're so used to having Melacha done by the guy, so what's going to be when the guy is not available? Chas Hashem, Yavei L'Asayis Ba'atzma. So all three reasons remind us it's not the guy's problem, it's my Chilul Shabbos. And that's why even if the guy doesn't ask you first, he does it on his own, there's no issur diba, no issur shlichus, but there's still the very important issur of Amira, L'Akum Al's Kala Beinech. Now these are the three reasons, and we once devoted a whole shir, the nafkaminas, which is not for now, but the way to remember it is the word Shabbos Kodesh. Kodesh in the Torah is spelled Kuf Dalet Shin. People spell with a Vav, it's not the spelling of the Torah. Kodesh is Kuf Dalet Shin, and that's the three reasons. Kala Beinecha, Darba Davar, and Shin Shlichus. Now, once we have the three reasons, Amir L'Akum, it's self-understood why it applies even to Yom Tov. Because Zil Basatayma. All three problems, Dibur, Mr. Halachos says it applies on Yom Tov also, Shlichus, and Kala Beinecha. So Iboy Yisema, Svaram, Amir L'Akum applies to Yom Tov. There is a problem called the Yom Tov guy. But I'll tell you something even more amazing. And that is, Iboy Yisema Kra. Because in Parshas Boy, the Torah speaks about the mitzvah of the Yom Tov of Pesach with the Yom mitzvahs, and then it talks about the Melacha on Yom Tov. But Yom Arisha and Mikra Kodesh, Taka says twice Kodesh without a Vav, Mikra Kodesh, Uva Yom Hashvi, Mikra Kodesh, Yelachem, Kol Melacha lo yei asa lahem. Melacha should not be done. Now, even if you don't know any diktuk, but you know the right word should be loisasa, loyasa. Why lo yei asa? It shouldn't be done. So the Mechilta in Parshas Boy, ois tes, it says for a reason lo yasa, lo yasa chavercha, v'lo yasa goy. So according to the Mechilta, the word lo yei asa, the pasuk in Parshas Boy is actually answering Amir L'Akum. But I'll tell you more than that. Rashi ala Torah in Parshas Boy on the pasuk lo yei asa ben afilu aidei acherim, which means a guy. So the Ramban, the Asikenim, the Re'im, all wonder, is Rashi implying that Amir L'Akum is a deraisa? It can't be. You know, Amir L'Akum is divrei sefer. The teretz is, Rashi held it's the Rabbanon, true, but L'maisa there's a smachta from a pasuk. So it's a pliya. The source of Amir L'Akum in the Torah, albeit a smachta, is not by Shabbos, is by Yom Tov. I'll tell you a Dav Acharif, the Kli Chemda in Parshas Emor, he says it can't be a remez to Amir L'Akum by Shabbos. Because the Torah says, Lo Yisasa Melacha. The Gemara Shabbos, Daf Kuf Darshins, Melacha D'Asura HaGram is Mutam in HaTorah. So if Gram is Mutam, it can't be Amir L'Akum is awesome. But Yom Tov doesn't say that Lashon, it only says Lo Yiyasam. There it could be at least a remez for Amir L'Akum. But be that as it may, there's no doubt about it, that Amir L'Akum on Yom Tov is as asa like Shabbos. In fact, the Makar in the Pasuk is by Yom Tov. Plus we have the famous Mishnah Megillah of Zayin Rabbeis, Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo eichel nefesh bilvad. Plus we have a Gemara Moed Katan Yud Beis, where the Gemara says even on Chol HaMoed, where it's not Yom Tov, the same Chayma, whatever a Yid cannot do, because sheini oisa, ein oimel l'nachi v'oisa. Toysin Bav Matzia Dav Tzadik, he says, Shabbos v'Yom Tov chada milsuhi v'gazru ata Shabbos. And the Mishnah Berurah puts it very clearly, Kol and Tafkuf Yud Zayin Tes, Kol Masha Oisa Lasa Da Yisrael Ba'atzmai, Osa Loima La'akum, Lasoisai B'Yom Tov. And finally, the Shulchan Aruch in Taf Tzadikei Aleph says, whatever is Asa on Shabbos is Asa on Yom Tov, and Zokti Mishnah Berurah, L'Rabbis Amir La'akum. And the Maisa, I must tell you that Chazal were very focused on protecting Yom Tov, and particularly Yom Tov Sheini, and especially when it comes to Amir La'akum. The Svar is Pashit, because Amir La'akum is very convenient. Rav once told me that people think that Amir La'akum is not only a heta, it's a way of life. You have a guy, you have a neighbor, an aide, and basically whatever you need, you call it a guy. Amir La'akum is not a heta, and not a way of life. In fact, the Taz in Tov Tzadikei Sif Katan Dalet says there are certain type of muktzes that on Yom Tov more chamer than Shabbos, because we have to be choished that Yom Tov people are mezalzel. Kolshkein Yom Tov Amir La'akum combination, it's really a problem. The Shulchan Aruch in Tov Tzadik Vav says if someone's mezalzel on Yom Tov Sheini, they would put him in chayrim, because Yom Tov Sheini needs more chizik, not to be mekel, especially Amir La'akum on Yom Tov Sheini is a very dangerous combination. Now, Lamaisa, before you apply this halacha Lamaisa, I must share with you a tshuvas min hashamayim, Siman Dal. That's one of the Rishonim, one of the Baliyatois, Bianchi Mimarvej, asked Shailas min hashamayim, and this is one of them. The Shaila was, can I ask a guy to move a candle on Shabbos? A candle is muktzah. So the response was, Ata poya maid imadi, don't move. Loisigi bayad, kisakel yisakel, or yare yare. V'chanageya b'divreihem, kinageya b'babaseinai. You play around with Shabbos, with Amir La'akum, you're playing around with the Baruch Shalom's pupil of his eye. Uv'chama mekaymas asu chizik d'vreihem, yoisem mishel Torah. And he concludes, kol ze hashivuli. That means even to have a guy do a Melacha d'Rabbanan on Shabbos is awesome. Now, we'll soon see that really, halacha, a shvus to shvus, is mutter makom tzorach. Obviously, this wasn't enough of a tzorach. But the way he puts it, yisakal yisakal or yari yari, because asu chizik yoisa mishel tzorach, because Amir La'akum needs chizik, people think it's a way of life, Yom Tov needs chizik, Yom Tov needs chizik, and that's why, although we will be mekel a lot today, I don't think it's called mekel, we'll hopefully mavar the halacha l'maisa, but it shouldn't be taken as a sort of a zilzul in Yom Tov. Like at Yom Tov, we're more choishes to be careful to keep halacha, especially Amir La'akum. Eitz Tova, whenever you mekel an Amir La'akum at home with a family, and it might be mutter, and you can be mekel, but explain to the family that really we don't have a guy do malacha not on Shabbos or Yom Tov, but in this particular case, b'makom mitzvah, whatever it is, because otherwise children get an unintended wrong message. I once saw a tshuva, and I found it recently again in Ber Moshe Chelivav Simonai Beis. They asked him. It turned a very hot day, and the Balbat wanted to have a guy put on the air conditioner. So he told them, my sheet is in the house when it's very hot you could be mekel, but not in a shul. He says, Rebbe, punk fakir. Amokim Rabbim, you should be more mekel. He goes, yes. But I was makabel with my father that in a tzibur you can't be mekel on Amir La'akum, because people think that Amir La'akum is not only a heta, way of life, like we said it. So first they were very upset, And then the Pellers, they came back to the Rebbe, you were right. Because when we told people you can't put on air conditioner, they said, what's wrong? You're not have a guy do whatever you want. So the Pellers, that the maid, that the Rebbe is right. But his attitude is, when you make in Amir La'akum, we sometimes send a wrong message. So even if you are makel at home with the family, explain them. Give them a lesson, give them an introduction. Amir La'akum is awesome. But in this particular case, it's mut. Now let's talk about halacha l'maisa. So first of all, I'm going to start off with we see the chaymer of it. Ma'isa shahaya, a guy brought adasim to a city. And today these things don't even make sense. We have adasim, plenty of adasim and rabbis, but in the olden days, not so long ago, they didn't grow adasim in every city, in every country. It had to be imported, and there was no hadasim to be bought for Yom Tov. Punkt, it happened to be a guy brought adasim. Shulchan Aruch and Tov Tes Aleph is talking about brought anything that we need, but Mr. Bura points out in the end of Tov Reish Nun Hey, the same shaila is when there was no hadasim or rabbis, and the guy brought it on Yom Tov. So the halacha is, it's also to use those hadasim or rabbis on Yom Tov. It was cut on Yom Tov by a guy, it's muktzah, and it's also Amir La'akum, it's having enough Melechas Akum. So, Lamaisa, Mr. Brewer says, better don't do a mitzvah. Now, shvus to shvus is mutter, maka mitzvah, there's not a shvus. There's an issur deraisa. This is the issur of ketzira. So, in other words, better don't do the mitzvah than do it ayidei amir la'akum or al muktzah. Question, the Shulchan Aruch says this, it's not a question, it's a psak, and Tafkuf Yud Aleph Sif Beis, that we're not allowed to cook water on Yom Tov to wash kol gufay, because it's considered a bishul shaloi l'tzoyrech shavel chol nefesh. And Zokter Ramah, even having a guy cook the water wouldn't be a heter, because again, this is a malacha deraisa, shaloi l'tzoyrech Yom Tov. If it ever happens, it used to be more negeya that a person got mail on Shabbos. So the Jews, they didn't have communications, phone, and all these type of ways of transmitting important news. They had letters, and a person received a letter on Shabbos or Yom Tov. It was something of importance. Maybe someone was nifta, someone was born, whatever it may be. So the halacha both on Shabbos and Yom Tov, to have a guy open the mail, if you suspect it's something of great importance, that's mutter, because that would be just an issur d'Rabbanan. That would be a shvus to shvus b'makom tzorah. Now, question in the sukkah that comes up: there's a noyis sukkah fell on the floor. Either it's in the way, but you're not going to move it because it's muktzah, or it's valuable and people are going to step in it, or it's going to get ruined, and or l'maisa, something has psukim on it, it has mishnayos on it, whatever it is. Can you have a guy, can you ask a guy to move the muktzah on Yom Tov? So here we come to a big yisoid, negate to Shabbos and Yom Tov, and negate to probably hundreds of Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch in Shin Zayin Hey says the yisoid is shvus to shvus for a guy to do on Shabbos or Yom Tov is mutter. What does it mean shvus to shvus? So it's very simple. When a guy does malacha, even does malacha deraisa, it's only one shvus. Because the guy do malacha and Amir La'akum d'Rabbanan, but he's doing an issur deraisa. Oh, that's a problem. A guy doing an issur deraisa is not mutter on Shabbos or Yom Tov. But if the guy is doing an issur d'Rabbanan, for our case, he's moving muktzah, so it's a double shvus. First of all, Amir La'akum is a shvus d'Rabbanan. Moving muktzah is a d'Rabbanan. So it's sort of a doubly diluted issur, and that's mutter b'makom either mitzvah. Makkah mitzvah, we'll soon give example. Tsar means the person is in pain. Hefsid merub is mutter. And the way to remember that, incidentally, is the word matzah. Mitzvah, tsar, and hefsid. So matzah, kodesh, and you're good to go. You have the whole Chabir La'akum. What would be an example? So makkah mitzvah would be very simple. The Shulchan Aruch gives an example. Again, today we don't even relate to this. But today we have so many shofars, we have so many everything. But in those days, they had one shofar in the city. And someone put it on before Yom Tov on a tree. So to go climb on a tree, take down a shofar, is an issur d'Rabbanan. But Zokter Mechaber, Makkah mitzvah, you could have a guy go up on the tree. This is both by Osh Shin Zayin and also Tafkuf Peivav Sif Chafal. That's Makkah mitzvah. But Makkah Tsar, we'll soon see, when a person is not feeling well, the halacha is a guy can be told to do a melacha an issur d'rabbanan. Now, if he's a chayla, even ein by sakana, we'll soon see, a guy could do any melacha, the issur d'rabbanan. But let's say it's just a meichush ba'alma, the guy could do a issur d'rabbanan for the yid. And hefsid merubah is understandable. A person we had a shiloh on someone's freezer, the plug was disconnected. Again, a lot of movement going on Yom Tov, especially on Sukkahs and Pesach. The children, and the plug was pulled out, and he has a well-stocked freezer with a lot of meat that's going to get ruined if you leave it until after Yom Tov. And there's no other freezer to put it in. So if you feel it's a hefsid merubah, you could have a guy plug in the freezer. Why? We'll soon see. Putting on electricity, if there's no age, is only d'rabbanan. This would be a shvus t'shvus b'makayim hefsid merubah. If someone's air conditioning system is freezing up, and if you leave it, it's going to break. So hefsid merubah, have a guy pull out the plug and disconnect the air conditioner or the system. That is a standard mitzvah, tsar, and hefsid merubah. Now, that once you have that in mind, we can understand the next question. I once saw this with my own eyes. Someone built a sukkah erev Yom Tov, okay, and he put up the schach mamash till last minute, and his wife came out to set up the table, and the sukkah on Yom Tov, the table was full literally with hundreds of fleas, like insects, of mosquitoes. It looked like mamash the makim mitzrayim. Mamash the table's covered with bugs. What happened? It was very simple. He stored the schach the year before when it was still wet. He put it in bags, put it into the garage, a perfect place to breed all these mosquitoes, and he put up the schach, and they all fell down. So it's not just a few mosquitoes, it was literally hundreds of mosquitoes. So this is definitely a problem. Now, if he's a single bacha and he could go eat by someone else for the 2 days and leave the bugs there, but he has a family, he's not going to go move into someone else. So here, to call a guy, even if it needs an exterminator, but killing these little bugs is at most a Melacha shricha legufa and issur d'rabbanan. So this is a shvus, the makkah mitzvah, eichel nefesh, definitely a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah, sleep in the sukkah. So if there's no other alternative, it would be mutter to call a guy and kill the bugs and get rid of them. We had a question, I think every year we have this question, somehow by a coffis, people's glasses got broken, the lens pops out of the frame, or the temple was disconnected. The kids at the bacha pasha can't see, but can he have a guy fix the glasses? So the emphasis is, there's a sharatzian in Shin Yud Gimel Sif Cotton Lamed Beis that discusses this shaila, and not glasses necessarily, but the problem is when you tighten a screw, and that really completes the making of the glasses, so that's l'chayr melacha d'oraisa. In fact, we find you shouldn't put in the lens without tightening the screw, because there is shema yiska, he might tighten the screw. And that's why this is a share for itself in Hilchos of Makabah Patish. But the Sharatzian does mention that in the worst scenario, some hold that tightening the screw, literally, not just putting it in without that, tightening the screw is only an issur d'rabbanan. So the Paiskim say, on Yom Tov, we could be makel and rely on a sheet that holds its d'rabbanan, even though some holds d'oraisa, and that's the cloud. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. The malachas of ktsira, betzira, tzeda, tlisha, toilish, toichen, and schita are all malachas on Yom Tov that are asa aydei Yisrael, because it's before lisha ve'elech. So you have all these malachas that are asa. What is the extent of the issa that a yid can make ktsira, betzira, tzeda, toilish, toichen, and schita? So it's a machlokes rishonim. Is it an issur d'oraisa because it's before lush, or maybe it's only an issur d'rabbanan because it's efshemi boyjoyim? So a number of poskim, Beroishim, the Pri Megadim, the Tshuvas Megiddo, he says when you have a machlokes, if the issur d'oraisa d'rabbanan regarding Amirah L'Akim, you could rely on the sheet that's d'rabbanan. So whenever you have a suffix d'oraisa d'rabbanan, you could rely that it's d'rabbanan. So I think in this case, if the person that needs the glass has no other choice, he can't see, he can't walk in the street, he's nervous about getting hit by a car, and he can't manage the way it is, if need be, he could have a guy even tighten the screw to the temple of the glasses, because we rely that Shema Yiska is a d'rabbanan, and it's a shvus b'makayim tzorich avli tzorich gadol. So this is basically the klal and Amirah L'Akim, especially on Yom Tov. If it's a machloikis, if it's deraisa derabbanan, you can rely that it's derabbanan. Now this is, and Klal will use this as we proceed a little more. A big question is, can a guy be asked to do an achana? In other words, I'll tell you pashta mash. The guy wants to wash the dishes. I have a maid in the house, and she wants to know, can I wash them now? Let's say this year Yom Tov sukkah is Tuesday and Wednesday. So you finish the Suda Tuesday, there are plenty of dishes to wash, the guy wants to wash them Tuesday. But you don't need them until Tuesday night, which is Yom Tov sheini. We know you can't do a Melacha on Yom Tov Rishon for Yom Tov sheini, because Yom Tov Rishon is the main Yom Tov sheini is the minig. So the question is, can a guy do achana on Yom Tov Rishon for Yom Tov sheini? So Lamaisa, we're talking about when there's no Melacha. The guy is going to set the table and cut the geviltevish, whatever it is, all the case where it doesn't involve Melacha. And maybe even washing dishes doesn't really necessarily involve a Melacha, because the guy could wash dishes with cold water. Using hot water on Yom Tov or Shabbos actually is a Melacha, right? But if the guy could do it with cold water, then using hot water is the nafshe. So let's talk about a Melacha, a achana that involves no Melacha, but it's achana. A yid can't do it. Achana is an issur rabbanan. So it's interesting, to my limited knowledge, there's no place in Shulchan Aruch that discusses this question. Is there an issur amirah la'akam by achana? Obviously, it's pashut. The question is pashut in which way? So the Pri Megadim, in the beginning of Taf Kuf Gimel, La'inyan Ayid, he says that achana ba'alma, even achana ba'alma with no malacha. For example, the gabbai mishing the Sefer Torah on the first day Yom Tov or the second day Yom Tov should not be done, because achana is all inclusive, even no malacha. And then he adds nistapaknu. We have a suffix aydei akum b'davar she'eina malacha yesh loim adisharim. So the Pri Megadim addresses our question, and he says, Efsha, a guy is not asa to make an achana Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheini, if it doesn't involve Melacha. Now, Lamaisa, the Pri Megadim writes, Nistapaknu, Yesh Loima, but if you know the Pri Megadim's style and his greatness was that he always left Sveikis. He was very, very much Meyiri Hayra. And he always wrote a suffix, but the place can say he was sure about it, but he didn't want to take that places. And I taka saw the Das Torah, the Bejana Rav, in Siman Tov Mem Dalet, he's talking about making beds on Erev Pesach, Shechal B'Shabbos, or any achana shayla. He says even making a bed that doesn't involve malacha is only achana, but it's also for yid. But for a guy to do it, I think it's mutter based on the Pri Megadim. He writes a lashon nistapaknu kedarkei atoiv. That's the way his great tzidkis to write sveikis. Mikol mokoim mistarver lahakol. So the Pri Megadim, and certainly the Das Torah, seems to hold amirah la'akam is only on malachas. On achana without malacha, there is no issur amirah la'akam. So to wash the dishes, if it doesn't involve any malacha, the guy could do it on Tuesday for Wednesday. The Yerabah in Reish Nun Beis, Sifkat Yud Beis, Mishtabur in Reish Nun Dal, Sifkat Chav Gimel, and other paiskim seem to say that this Yisoy, amirah la'akam for achana for a guy is okay. The problem is Mishtabur and Shin Chaf Aleph, Sifkat and Chaf Aleph, Ayin Sham, Shin Yotes, Sifkat and Pei Beis, and other paiskim seem to say beferish amirah la'akam applies even to the issur of achana. And that's why it's a big sugya. But to make a long story short, Rav Shlomo Miller in one of his svarim is quoted as saying that amirah la'akam only is asa a malacha, like the mashmois of the Pri Megadim and the Das Torah. To have a guy make hachanam Yom Tov Rishon Yom Tov sheini is fine. And he even writes dishes, washing dishes, since it doesn't involve any malacha, because the hot water versus cold water is a daita de nafshe, the maid could be asked to wash dishes on Tuesday for Wednesday. However, many paiskim, the Heintige paiskim, point to the Mishtabur in a few places that says that it does apply even amirah la'akam without malacha. And that's why we're going to say that lamaisa, it's not as simple as we would like it to be. Although I saw the Minchas Yom Tov in Siman Kuf Aleph, Sikot and Ches, he talks about taka making the beds. He goes, you could be making like they akum, but I can't say it's l'chol hadayis. So amirah la'akam are going to say when someone has a choice, let the guy do it at night. But if it is a tzorech, especially in a hotel or in a yeshiva, in a moisid, that you can't start preparing for Yom Tov Sheini at 72 minutes after Shkia, because they're going to be finished davening soon. So hachana does not involve melacha, amekel, bevada yesham ilismaich, hamachmet tavi alav bracha. But lemaisa, the question is, if you have a maid that works for you, and you need the maid to come on Yom Tov, so they could do whatever's necessary on Yom Tov without a melacha. How do you pay the maid? So the truth is, Mr. Brura, in a different context, in Tov Kuf Yud Zayin Tiv Kot and Hey, writes that if you have a guy and he's leaving your house and you want to pay him for something you owe him, you shouldn't even leave money and say, take the money. Because the guy is walking out of your house with money. So it's very logical that to tell a guy, I left you money, take the money before you leave. If there won't be a Chil Hashem, of course, if the guy is understanding, I'll take after Yom Tov, it's not kedai to pay the worker on Yom Tov itself, because this would be a violation of an Uvda D'Chayil. A guy is being paid, walking out of your house with money, and that would be an issur of Uvda D'Chayil. Of course, make sure that the guy is not unhappy. They might not trust you, but once you know that the guy is fine, you pay them either before Yom Tov or after Yom Tov. Now, when is the earliest time to do achana on Yom Tov Rishon for Yom Tov Sheini? So, of course, for a Yid, we try to keep this man, the 72 minutes man, or 60, whatever's man you keep. But no doubt about it, regarding Amirah La'akum, even if you try to avoid achana mi Yom Tov Rishon L'Sheini, but probably after Shkia, when it's ready bein hashmashos, l'gabi the issur of achana, you could be makel that achana we mutai de akum. And again, when you have a big oilam and a tircha de tzibura, sometimes it's unavoidable. Question: someone on Yom Tov is not feeling well. He needs Tylenol. He's not sick. He's mechush ba'alma, but he's uncomfortable, and he has no Tylenol. Can you have a guy go buy him on Yom Tov? So the truth is, I want to make a point because people Yom Tov Rishon or Sheini. We'll see. So the Maisa in Shin Chav Ches Yud Zayin, the Mechaba says that as clear as can be. When you have a chayla shein by sakana, a guy could do any and every melacha, the rais or the rabban. Why? There's no sakana, but he's a chayla. I know this because someone told me he went to Chashevit's house, who was not well, who was a sick person, and this Chashevit couldn't swallow food. It was a question of sakana. So you have to puree all the food. And he saw the guy on Shabbos putting the food into a food processor and pureeing food. What's going on here? What about Chilul Shabbos? I said, it's not Chilul Shabbos, it's Shmir Shabbos. This is a mechaba. The guy could do malacha deraisa. Kolshkein, a food processor might even be the rabbanim. The guy could also cook it if it won't be bishalakum. But the point is, it's takatoich, you're right, toich deraisa. But anyhow, the point is that Amir la'akum by Chayil Shem by Skana is mutter on Shabbos and Kolshkein Yom Tov. The only shaila is when someone is in pain relief, what we call it, but he's not sick. He has a headache, a toothache, a minor burn. So the Mechaber says that's for a Yid to take medicine on Shabbos is us. Again, antibiotics is always mutter on Shabbos because he's a Chayil Shem by Sakana. But pain relief is the one thing that's also on Shabbos. Now, on Hilchas Yom Tov Sheini, Tov Tzadik Vav Beis, the Shulchan Aruch says that really Yom Tov Sheini is no different than Yom Tov Rishon. Even though there's a big difference. Yom Tov Rishon is the Raisa, Yom Tov Sheini is a minig, the Rabbanim. But Chazal were extremely protective of Yom Tov Sheini because people have all these cheshbainis. It's only a minig. Did you notice that we don't wear tefillin Yom Tov Sheini? We say Mekadesh Yisrael Vazmanim. We don't daven weekday. If you daven Yom Tov davening on during the weekend, Ayoytza. So we're very confident it's a real Yom Tov. But Lamaisa, the point is that it comes to one thing, two things we're makel on Yom Tov Sheini more than Yom Tov Rishon. And that is a covenant maid. We'll soon talk about that. And also, when a person is mitzdayer, he has this type of pain. So the halacha is, in that type of case, he could take medicine. In other words, loimi boy, taking antibiotics or doctor prescribed, you take it every Shabbos. But pain relief, mechush ba'alma, a headache, which on Shabbos we don't take pain relief, but Yom Tov Sheini you're allowed to. And that's the special heta of Yom Tov Sheini because a person is suffering, Chazal will make it. Now, what's interesting is, a Yid could take medicine. What could a guy do? So, we might say, what do you mean? The guy could do nothing. Why should the guy do Melacha D'Oraisa for a Mechush Ba'alma? And Taka the Sharatzian says, Aidei Akum, it's only mutter to do what's mutter Yid could do, but he can't do a Melacha Deraisa because someone has a Meichesh Balma. But the understanding, yeah. But the Chiddush here is that someone asked a very good question. Why can't a guy even do a Melacha Deraisa, if need be, to get pain relief for a Yid? What was his cheshbon? Because since Yom Tov Sheini is only a Drabanan, so the Amirah La'akum on a Drabanan is Shvus to Shvus. Shvus to Shvus is Mutter Makam Tzairach. If this person's in pain, why can you say he could go and do a Melacha Deraisa? So it's a good question, but it's an important mistake that we have to point out. The Noid de Yehuda, the great Noid de Yehuda in Archaim Tinyan, a Simon Memdal, was asked to Shaila by a Rav who allowed the fixing of an Erev. Now, Yom Tov, we don't need an Erev, but it was Friday, Yom Tov going into Shabbos. And he allowed the fixing of an Erev because it's only Yom Tov Sheini, and it's a Shvus to Shvus. And he writes to the Noid Yehuda, people rejected my psak, what do you think? Noid Yehuda says, oh, you made a mistake. Because to say that Yom Tov Sheini is a Shvus, and to call it Shvus to Shvus, is the greatest Zilzal Yom Tov Sheini. And you can't do that. Chazal will never make it. He says, Varaya, let's say you're building a shul for a big oilam, and they push it every day counts. No one's makel to build it on Yom Tov Sheini because it's Shvus to Shvus. Zok Rabbi Yehuda, there's a whole list of issur dabanan that we don't do on Shabbos or Yom Tov, the Mishnah and Beya. No one says Yom Tov Sheini is mutter. Zok Rabbi Yehuda, you know why? Because you can't say Yom Tov Sheini is a Shvus, even though it is. Because that's the biggest zilzal. Now it's a tremendous insight. Because Yom Tov Sheini has this great disadvantage, it's at risk. It's only a minig or a dabanan, but Chalila to call it a Shvus to Shvus. Now I want to add, Lamais you can be makel for a lavaya or for somebody's mitzvah, because people understand covered a mace or humans suffering, but to give it a label, Shvus to Shvus, that's going in the problem of zilzal on Yom Tov Sheini. I did see the Hilchos Chag B'Chag Chelik Beis Amud Kuf Samach Tes. He disagrees talking with the Sharatzian that says there's no difference goy and a goy on Yom Tov, and he says, but there's always a difference Yom Tov Sheini, Yom Tov Rishon. And he brings a raya from a Sharat Shuva and Tov Tzadik Vav Gimel that if a person has a terrible toothache, in those days they yanked the tooth out, you could have a goyish dentist pull out the tooth. So you see, b'makam tsar, you would do Melacha Deraisa the Yakov. Pulling out a tooth is Melacha Deraisa. But Lamaisa, our Paisik, Mr. Brewer, does not say like that, and obviously the point is, in that case, that might be only the Rabbanan if you look into the sugya pulling out a tooth, but the end of the day, the halacha is a goy cannot do Melacha Deraisa just for mitzvah. And I know this is not so negeya, but I wanted to at least bring out the Noid Yehuda's golden Yisoid. Even though Yom Tov Sheini in Yisoid is a Drabanan, but we can give it the label of a Shvus to Shvus b'makayim Tzoyra. Now this will explain the next Shaila, which is something maybe unprecedented, but it should never be negeya, but I want to bring out the point for the not the actual Shaila itself, the very difficult sugya of a lavaya on Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheini. So if you look in Shulchan Aruch Tov Kuf Chavav, come out a whole siman about this Shaila, that basically, based on a Gemara, you're allowed to make an Alvaya Yom Tov Rishon and Yom Tov Sheini. The difference is Yom Tov Rishon, you're going to have a goy. Yom Tov Sheini, even a Yid could do some of the Malachas. Now, Lamaisa, this is not done in most Kilas, and I'll explain you why. In the olden days, not so long ago, before communication and before transportation, a Levaya basically was in a shtetl. The Beis HaKvaros typically was not far from the shtetl, outside, the outskirts, and no one called people, and no one had to call up relatives that had to drive to the Levaya and drive to the Beis HaKvaros, which is Asa, Yom Tov Rishon, or Sheini. It was basically non-Melacha, just the Chevra Kadisha, who knew what they were doing. So the Levaya was done b'shmiras Yom Tov, and it was a covet for the mace. Zokter Moshe in the Tshuva Chelik Gimel Siman Ayin Dalid. Look today, what's going on? You have a Levaya, and right away you call every relative under the sun. Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Sheini, people don't make a chilik. And a relative that's not from will drive to Levaya, and maybe even drive to the Beis HaKvaros. Malachas Deraisa, don't forget, driving a car is the worst Chilul Shabbos known to mankind. We'll soon see 2,000 or up to 4,000 issur Torah per minute. So how could you have a levaya that's the greatest bezoyin hamez, bezoyin of Yom Tov? And Rav Moshe Taka says that that's why the minig had to be stopped. Now Rav Moshe obviously was convinced of this psak in a later tshuva in Yeridei Chel Gimel Kuf Samach Aleph. He says since people listen to the psak not to make a levaya, maybe the kroib don't have a din of an oinen because they're not involved in levaya. But be that as it may, Rav Moshe very strongly believed that because it's a zilzal in Yom Tov Sheini, now it's a pliya, you're oika a siman in Shulchan Aruch, a din Gemara, not so much Yom Tov Rishon, it's Yom Tov Sheini. The Torah says Adrabah. Because Yom Tov Sheini is at risk, only a minig, D'Rabbanan, we have to set the record straight. The Rav Shlomo Zalman in the Sefer Shulchan Shlomo in Siman Tov Kuv Chavav agrees that because of the Zilzal Yom Tov Sheini, a vai should not be made. In fact, they have a story there. Someone asked them that in a certain city where it's under control, there won't be Chil Yom Tov. You'll have to do a vai Yom Tov Sheini. Nothing wrong. It's halacha. Can you have a guy driving around the city with a loudspeaker announcing the levaya of so and so? Some Zalman said that's the biggest Zilzal Yom Tov. And also, you're not allowed to spread bad news. You're making people depressed on Yom Tov. But the point is, you have to make sure that doesn't bring a Zilzal. The Shevet HaLevi in Chelik Vav, Siman Samach Gimel also agrees that Lamaisa, because there's so much Chilul Yom Tov involved, if you know that's the case, don't make the levaya. Now I do know that some kilos still have the minig, the way the Gemara says, the Shulchan Aruch. I know the Vina Rav Zechayna Levrach's levaya was Yom Tov Sheini of Rosh Hashanah, and it's done. If it's done with control, so you have a Gemara. But at least you should realize, my point again is not to paskin this global issue. That's not my place. It's because Bi'elam Avos on Netzach. That's the psak. But to realize that those poskim that held to delay a kfura and Ramosh the Farish, even if it entails waiting 3 days, Thursday and Friday is Yom Tov, going into Shabbos, a person can wait from Thursday till Sunday. But it's all because of a shmira of Yom Tov Sheini. My point is to highlight the greatness of Yom Tov Sheini, not so much the levaya, pro or con, but again to bring out the point of Yom Tov Sheini. Now, the next question is a big question with many nafkaminas, and that is, can a guy be called to put on the lights, or close the lights, or put on the oven, or the urn, or the crock pot? And we'll even talk about driving a car. Basically, which malachis in the modern world of appliances, which can the guy do on Yom Tov? Don't forget, the sukkah needs lights for the Suda, but doesn't need lights for sleeping. What happens if the lights are exactly the opposite the way you want it? Can the guy be asked to put on the lights or close the lights? So the intelligent question to ask is, well, what's the level of issur for a guy to put on an oven, or the guy to put on a light? If it's a deraisa, then you can't be mekel. If it's D'Rabbanan, we know shvus to shvus, b'makayim mitzvahs mutam. If a person can't eat in the sukkah at night, it's too dark, and even lighting candles won't make it comfortable enough, it might be a makam mitzvah to have a guy light the lech, put on a candle, or put on lights, whatever it is. So the question is, what is the extent of lighting a candle? And today, it's appliances that involve a coil, a heating element that might be the same like an eish. So that's an excellent question. Because on Shabbos, there's no doubt about it. Lighting a fire is Melacha deraisa, havar. Lighting a candle from an existing candle is also deraisa, havar. But Yom Tov, we know you're allowed to light a candle from a candle. The only issur is creating a new light, a new age. What is the extent of creating, taking a match and lighting a fire, or putting on a stovetop and lighting an age? So the Gemara in Beya basically says, "Ein moitziin issur." You're not allowed to make a fire. Lo min ha'eitzim v'lo min avonim. You can't create a fire on Yom Tov, but it doesn't say why. So the Gemara spells out in Rashi, and the Mishnah quotes it: "Mishum de kamoilid b'Yom Tov." You're creating a new fire on Yom Tov. So the simple reading of the Gemara with Rashi is that enchanami, there's no issur deraisa making a fire on Yom Tov, but there's an issur derabanan of moilid. You're not allowed to be moilid a reyach on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to be moilid. To give example of the whipped cream. Making whipped cream is moilid. You're creating something. You're not allowed to crush ice to make water. Making a fire is moilid. You're creating a new entity. And that's a tremendous kula. That means making a fire, a real fire, is only D'Rabbanan. Now that's the shita of many, many poskim. The Magen Avram says in Tavkuf Beis Aleph, the Taz in Tavkuf Beis Aleph holds that's really Nisa Deraisa, because the Melacha Efshimi Boyjoim. But be that as it may, our shaila of a yid or a guy, v'havdol, making a fire on Yom Tov, like many poskim, is only midrabanan al tzmoilid, and there are poskim, enough poskim that hold it to deraisa. Now the question is, for a yid to do it is unthinkable. Even Mr. Rabbanan, even the Mesayfer. Can I have a guy light a candle for me when there's no fire around? He'll take a match and light the candle. It's totally in the shaila. So here we have the Prima Godim in his Tshuva Sefer Megiddo Siman Kuf Yud. Kedarkai, very brief, but the Godim was asked this very shaila, and he said that we could rely on two sveikas. First of all, maybe it's the whole issur making a fire for is only moilid eish, moilid. So it's a D'Rabbanan. And also the makom tzorich, we could rely on a shita that you could have a goy do malacha deraisa. The makom tzorich, like the makom mitzvah, like the bala ita. But primarily he seems to be soymech on the shita that a guy that lighting a fire on Yom Tov is kol kulei midrabanan. And that's why the Masham, Chelik Dalet Siman Kuf Mem Gimel, the Shevet Levi, Chelik Chav Kuf Chav Aleph, Oznid B'Yud Beis Lamed Beis, feel that we could rely on this Megiddos, that regarding Amirah La'akum, not Lagabi Yisrael, Amirah La'akum, making a fire in the worst scenario is no more than the Rabbanan of Moilid Eish. So therefore, a guy could be asked when there's no fire to light a fire. Now, Baruch Hashem, today we have neighbors, and if you don't have if you need a fire to light neighbors, Yom Tov sheini, go to the neighbor. But let's say a person needs eish, but more practically, his oven is off, the crockpot is off, the urn is off, somehow the plug was pulled out. Bekitza, you're doing an halachic eish deraisa, putting on an urn, crockpot, oven, mikveh heater, are all deraisas. It's eish. That's Shabbos. Yom Tov, putting on an urn can't be worse than a guy lighting a fire. So if a guy could light a fire, b'makom calls shvus to shvus, b'makom mitzvah. If he could light a fire mamash, he could definitely light a urn, crockpot, etc., etc. And certainly he could put on an air conditioner or put the plug back in the refrigerator that was pulled out, because that's only the Rabbanan. There's no eish there. It's only the issur moilid of electricity. And this is the shita based on the Megiddos, and many poskim do agree. Now, the only point is you have to make sure that it qualifies to be a makom tzorich. Because as the Mishnah writes in one place, to having your brand of soda is probably a mitzvah of simchas, Yom Tov, Einik Shabbos. But is that enough of a mitzvah if you have something else to drink? To call, have the Halachos Shabbos, to call a guy to buy the soda for me on Yom Tov, Shvus to Shvus? It has to be a tzorich. Not more than just a kiyum of Einik Shabbos, it has to be a real need. In fact, I must mention the Noid Behuda in the Archaim Lamed Gimel. He writes, and he bemoans the practice that on Nilo Yom Kippur, when they already finished the Shemona Esrei, and now it's already dark, and the shul is dark, there's no lights. Don't forget, they didn't have lights, the candles burnt out. So they would call a guy to be able to say the piyutim of Nilo. So Behuda writes with great pain, Mi bikesh zois v'yedchem. Who asked you to say piyutim? There's one candle by the Amid, let him say piyutim, and you could hear it, and you could think about it, and you could say with him, but who gives you a right to light an eish deraisa on Yom Kippur, just a piyutim? Now we think Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, this is in my Achshvei Masai. And the Goyin and Ma'aserav and Reishit Beis had the same criticism. There's no heter to light a candle for Ne'ilah Yom Kippur, just say piyutim. Now that shows that the tzorich has to be a very legitimate tzorich. But at the end of the day, if you have a tzorich to call a guy to put on an urn, a crockpot, in other words, if you have a stovetop that's anyhow on, maybe try to use that, or maybe use a neighbor that has an oven on. But if you determine that you need it, a mitzvah, tsar, or hefsid merubah, then it will be even mutter to do an appliance that's a melacha deraisa of eish. Just like eish is mutter, so to an appliance that's halachically equivalent to eish is also mutter. It's pashit, avada, if the alarm is ringing and it's getting you nervous, you can have a guy close it, again put on the air conditioner, put back the plug in the refrigerator or the freezer plug that was disconnected. Those are all real drabbanans, shvus to shvus, b'makom tzorich would be mutter. Now, the light in the sukkah the plug was pulled out, again put now. Today, rather, the lights are not the Raisa holidays. It's all LED. But even if you have, for some reason, an incandescent bulb on your sukkah, which is a deraisa on Shabbos, but we treat that on Yom Tov like a Rabbanon, Moiled Eish, and a guy could ask to put on that light on Yom Tov, of course not on Shabbos. Now, of course, if you have a sukkah, there's no light, and you light a few extra candles, and you might feel that it's a very elegant candle lighting Suda, and you're happy with that, gesund to hate. But that's subjective. Some people feel like it's just very depressing. But if you accept that as a legitimate need, it's mutter even to light a fire, the rice and kolshkein, any and every appliance. If someone can't, the sukkah was his dining room, now it's his bedroom, but the light's not going off. They forgot to put on a timer. So again, to close the light is definitely the rabbanon. That's a kibui, ein tzrich legufa, and that will be mutter aydei akum. Ma'aseh is a true story. Someone Erev Shabbos, Erev Yom Tov, he was very frantic. He came late, so he parked it by a place that he heard is a towaway zone. In other words, within a few hours they're going to have a ticket and towed, and he's going to have to get it back. It's going to end up being a hefsid merubah. So someone asked Rav Vazna, is any heter to have a guy drive the car to a more safer spot? So Rav Vazna is happy to be makel. Driving a car is the Melacha deraisa. Now, just to make it a long story short, since the Torah was given, there's no chilul Shabbos as great as driving a car. If you know a little bit about the way a car works, there's a spark plug that shoots a spark that connects with the gas and it makes an explosion. Now, minimally, today's cars, the RPM, is 2,000 times per minute. So there's 2,000 chilul Shabbos deraisas per minute. They could even go up to 4,000. But no doubt about it, there's no greater chilul Shabbos deraisa, thousands per minute. So Rav Vazna is happy to be makel, have a guy drive the car. And that's why on Shabbos, when a person's car is in the place where it's towed, so either afsar and afshi. But I saw, and this makes sense, that on Yom Tov, believe it or not, to have a guy move the car, makam hefsid merubah, should be mutter. Again, hefsid merubah. Why? Because even eish mamish is mutter. And mutter, I say, is a rabbanon, and a mutter makam shvus to shvus. And taka the nitty gavriel, perik lamed gimel, sifa gimel, spells just this out. Another question, someone asked, he got right before Yom Tov, he got a call from a customer, a very valued customer, who wants to make a huge order. And this order would be, mamish, if he gets it, good. If he doesn't get it, it's a hefsid merubah. Can he call a delivery service that will drive you have to deliver it. He only is taking the order if he gets it within 24 hours. Can he hire a messenger service, delivery service, a guy, to make a delivery on the first day Yom Tov? So the chayra, we have the heta of this heta, the chayra of a car being, what? Let's say Toichat Chum. I'm talking about the driving Shabbat. But the emphasis is a mistake there. Because this is only a Menias Revach. On Cholamoid, there's a big difference in Menias Revach and Hefsed Merubah. And I didn't know if this is true, because maybe Cholamoid is different. But the Rav Shulchan Aruch in Reiv Samach Vav Kuntres Achans Yiv Katan Zayin, in a different context, spells it out. The het of Hefsed Merubah on Shabbos and or Yom Tov is only by a Hefsed Merubah of Kerem. But what's Menias Revach, there would be no het. Now the sukkah problems of the sukkah itself, where the bamboo mats flew off or fell down, a wall caved in. I remember when I was a child, there was a huge hurricane, and half the sukkahs in Borough Park were destroyed. The kids are rebuilding a sukkah, or putting back the mat, which is basically making a sukkah, is a mutay de akum, that's zichah shir for itself, but just what's negel in yanenu. The question is, what is the extent of a guy rebuilding a sukkah or putting schach on top of a sukkah? Although it's a bamboo mat, it's lightweight, but he's making the oil. So this is a sugya of oil, and one could reason that if it's just 7 days, maybe it's an oil aroy. But then again, we know that regarding tying shoes, we consider something aroy versus kva if 24 hours. So this is again a huge sugya, but the Prima Godim in Tov Reish Chavav Sif Katan Ches has a shaila where someone had a sukkah that was nailed shut from last year, and for some reason he didn't get around to opening it before sukkahs. Can he have a guy open up the sukkah which is making an oil? And he goes, no, you shouldn't do that. Pshia de shikha, how could that be mutter? Now, so therefore he says that if you are pesheya and you didn't make a sukkah, you can have a guy do it for you. But efsha, if have the schach, if to have the guy put the schach on when it was made before Yom Tov, but it fell off, efsha, it would be mutter, but he says, aval hayres heta chalilali b'tzarchim b'chol zeh. He doesn't say why. Maybe he felt that oil for 7 days is an issur deraisa. You can't have a guy do it. The problem is that he himself, in his Tshuvas Megidos, that I mentioned earlier, but it's a Tshuva earlier, Kuf Tes, he writes, Ma'aseh Shahaya, it was Shabbos Yom Tov, and Levov, I lived, and the Pe'alam Atzelim, he gives them a very honorable title. They built the sukkah that was temporary by nature, and it fell apart on Shabbos. They built it, Baby Yom built it, and Baby Yom it fell apart. And I was in terrible distress because I had no place else to eat, and my family called a guy, and the guy repaired the sukkah. So how did that stem? The Pri Megadim says Chalila Haris Lihet, and he himself was more Ma'ir Heta. And don't think for a moment the Pri Megadim forgot the tshuva, because in a different place he references the Tshuvas Megiddos that he wrote. So a lot has been written about this, but the sense of the Paiskim is the Chutshani and Sukkah's Amar Kuf Tzadik Zayin Melachim Nayach is a beautiful shtickle and Perek Vav Ori Yudalet the Megid Yehuda on the Tzeifa on the Megiddos. They all say the critical difference is if the person was Pesheya and didn't bother building the sukkah, putting on the schach before Yom Tov, then there's no het amir la'akum. But if he did whatever he could, and either the sukkah collapsed or the schach collapsed, you could rely on the shittas that it's only 7 days is a binyan aroy. Once it's an aroy, it's a drabanan. So it's a shvus, b'makay mitzvah of sukkah. So if he has no place else to eat, it would be a legitimate heta. Now someone said, why can't you build it, let the guy build it, and take it apart, Matzah Yom Tov, Rishon. But that doesn't seem to be correct, because if by its structure it's collapsed, it lasts. So basically, the Paiskim do seem to agree to what the Megadim writes in the Tshuvas. If there's a need and it couldn't be avoided before Yom Tov, he did all he could, and either the schach fell down or a wall caved in, this would be a legitimate shvus b'makay mitzvah, and the guy could be asked to actually correct the problem. Now, Mr. Brewer says in Tov Reish Lamed Gimel, he quotes a Yitzchak Chanan the Tshuva in the Ber Yitzchak, and although Mr. Brewer is talking about putting back the schach, but the Ber Yitzchak is even makel in the case of building, if he built before Yom Tov, because again, building an oil aroy is no different than putting schach on oil aroy. They're both the Rabbanans. Let me leave you a few ha'aras l'maisa. It was a very heavy rain once on Sukkot, Yom Tov, Sukkot, Pesach, whatever it was, and a person had a long walk to go. So he asked, can he have a guy walk with him? And the guy will carry one of these big umbrellas. People call it a gaiva umbrella. I like to call it a Halachos orchim umbrella. It's enough for at least 2 people. So the guy is walking with him, and he's going to walk, and he doesn't have to get wet. So the truth is, in Seichel, he might have a point. Because an oil held by a human being is definitely an oil aroy. But this is a tremendous zilzul Yom Tov. To walk through the streets of Borough Park, Flatbush, or Muncie Lake, whatever it is, with a guy carrying an umbrella, it just doesn't stem. It reminds me of some Zalman's Psak, of the broadcasting, the Levaya, with a ramkol, with a loudspeaker. It's just inappropriate. But last but not least, this is something you could take home with you for Simchas Yom Tov. Let's say, we'll call him Ben Chutz Laretz, me or you, we go to Eretz Yisrael for Yom Tov. And let's say issur chag is a great example. The Eretz Yisrael is strict to the gel, strict to the velt, they're back, they're going to yeshiva, they're going to work, it's back to normal. And I'm keeping Yom Tov sheini. Can I ask a guy, an Israeli guy, to do Melacha for me? Because I'm stuck, because I don't have, they didn't cook enough. Can I have a guy do Melacha for me? So the question, can I have a Yid do Melacha for me? So we would think, in Seichel, to have a Yid do Melacha doesn't sound right. Because Lamaisa, a Yid do Melacha for me. But have a guy, he's a guy. But the emphasis is punkt fakert. For a Yid to do Melacha for me, mi'ikidadin might not be terrible. Because just like if I'm a Kabbalah early Shabbos on a regular Shabbos, up to Shulchan Aruch, the end of Reish Samach Gimel, I could ask a Yid that was not a Kabbalah Shabbos to do Melacha for me. So here it's even better if it was issur chag. Now, Lamaisa the minig is we don't do that, but we can understand why it's mutter. But here's the beauty of the sugya. For an Israeli guy to do Melacha for me, it's much worse. Is a guy, adrabim. A guy is never mitzvah in Shabbos. A guy is only mitzvah in being Mechal Shabbos. So what's the issur mir la'akum? It's my problem. It's my issur. So even if the guy is an Israeli guy, it doesn't make him less of a guy. He still has to Mechal Shabbos. So what's this Amir La'akum? My problem. And that's where Moshe says in the Tshuva Chele Gimel, Siman Ayin Gimel, it's much more of a problem having a guy to do it than a yid to do it. L'maisa, we don't want a yid to do it either. I couldn't talk to you all. Shalom Aleichem. Thank you for your valuable input. We needed it.
Shem Irgen Shirtel, like you will be Gashikoyach, that was mitzvah today's shir. Today's shir was learned later Nishmas Alta, Sarah Etelbas, Balter, Yechiel, Michel, Shalom, Yotzad Chof El. Today's supposed to Tshuva Tzara Chaim to have the great solicitor sponsoring the shir. Call Irgen Shir, Tyra 718-851-865, want to email ist@yeshivanet.com. Tonight, ben Akashem, Motzagis Bochel, Zakes, is a Shalafik, Hibram, Sai, Midrash Nema, the Nech Office, and Sitya Yagvil, Tzara Yadeh. God is God, Ishmael Abba. Hey! Hey! What's it? How do we keep it? Yeah. Ready? Yeah. Okay. Seek him. I'll relay the Maggid Shir.
Okay, no doubt Amir La'akum is very, very chomer. That's an understatement. And Yom Tov also, Ibayisei Mekra, the Pasuk Lo Yayasa, the Ibayisei Mesvara, all three reasons of Kodesh apply, Kala Dibur and Shlichus. And basically, Yom Tov, in a certain sense, is more chum as we saw. Chazal are very protective, especially from Yom Tov Sheini. So there's Amir La'akum on Yom Tov like Shabbos is not a heta and certainly not a way of life. If a guy cut an arava, it would be also for the yid to use it, even if he has no other arava. Again, it's not the question of shvus malka mitzvah. This is an issur deraisa. A guy that cooked, they should not cook water for a chitzas Yisrael, because lamaisa, it's still that same issur Amir La'akum. Shvus to shvus on Shabbos and Yom is mutar makayim mitzvah, tsar and hefsid meruba, matzah, and that applies to Yom Tov as well. Now, moving noy sukkah is a good example of shvus to shvus. It's only muktzah. Killing insects, if there's ein tzricha legufa, is also the tzarech Yom Tov. The guy could kill whatever's necessary. That would be an issur d'Rabbanan, shvus to shvus. Tightening a screw in the glasses, the temple or the lens, whatever it may be, if he cannot manage without it, we would rely on the sheet that it's only the Rabbanan, so the shvus to shvus. Hachana de Akum, there are a lot of places where they make it across the board. Some are machmir, but definitely without Melacha, there's yeshla mi lismach. With Melacha, I've got it worse. The guy to wash dishes, if it doesn't involve Melacha on Yom Tov Rishon v'Sheni, yesh makilim, yesh machmirim. The earliest time to begin hachana for a guy on Tov Sheni, probably after Shkia already, you could already consider it a ben hashmasha, dik a suffix. The chayla she'ein by sakana Melacha can be done by a guy even the Raisa, Shabbos and Yom Tov. A levaya, which never should be negeya, but the fact that it's delayed, according to many shittas, for 3 days, highlights the importance of course, of Yom Tov Sheni. For a guy to light a fire, or coil, or any melacha deraisa on Shabbos, about the Shabbos he doesn't do, but on Yom Tov, eish, electricity that's eish, is only the Rabbanan, and the guy can be asked to do what's necessary, a shvus to shvus, b'makayim, mitzvah tzar, hefsid meruba. To make sure, of course, it's a real tzorech. Don't forget the Goyin and the Rabbi Yehuda's resistance of lighting a candle for Ne'ilah, even though Ne'ilah is Ne'ilah, but has to be a legitimate halachadik tzorech. Alarm, an air conditioner, refrigerator, closing lights are all d'Rabbanan. Shvus is definitely mutar b'aydi akum. A guy can move a car, b'makam hefsid meruba, but not for mnias revach. Putting back schach or even repairing the walls, if there is no other alternative, will be mutar b'aydi akum. No sukkah on the floor definitely is mutar, and an umbrella on a rain by a guy should not be used. And basically, and ben chutzlaris and Eretz Yisrael, Amir La'akum is also like it is on every single Shabbos.